Hi everyone, welcome to the community classroom. What we're going to be addressing today is the issue of child support, and we're going to look at the relationship between child support and the receipt of public assistance. We're going to look at obligations for child support and who has that obligation. We're going to look at the role of child support in the context of public assistance. We're going to look at why child support cases are opened when there is a request for public assistance. We're also going to look at the dynamic of establishing paternity and maternity and divorce versus non-marital child support situations and requests for public assistance. We're going to look at the issue of standard of living and the purposes and uses of child support. And then we're going to also look at the types of assistance available for individuals who are looking for public assistance. This is Dr. Tracey McCarthy, psychologist, attorney, and educator. Let's get started. And as a little reminder, if you see this video on any other channel other than Dr. Tracey McCarthy, it is stolen and unauthorized. Now let's first start off with talking about what child support is and what it is not. Child support basically is a court-ordered payment from one parent to another parent or to a guardian. And the purpose of child support is to provide care for the child. And both parents, you have to remember this, both parents are legally obligated to provide for all children created. And child support is basically for things like food, clothing, shelter, education, childcare, health care, extracurricular activities, and other incurred expenses. Many people believe that child support is to go to the child, but child support really is a form of reimbursement to generally the custodial parent or the other parental household. And there's some additional expenses that child support can be used for and will be used for. Things like heat and electricity, so your utilities, purchasing furniture for the home, cleaning supplies, cookware, maintenance for the car, and things like gas. And so contrary to popular belief, the child support, the person who is the payor, the person paying the child support, they are not in control of what happens with the child support or how that child support is used in the custodial home. And it's usually going from the non-custodial home to the custodial home. Sometimes it doesn't go directly in that direction depending on the income and resources of the parents, but generally that's the direction that it goes in. The person who does not have custody is paying child support to the person who generally has that primary physical custody. Now, there's a lot of misleading information in the media, and particularly social media, where people are talking about child support and who's obligated to pay child support. And sometimes people are very upset about receiving child support orders. But let me clarify what child support is all about a little bit more here. Child support also is about maintaining the standard of living for the child. And so children basically are entitled to live according to the standard of living of the parents. And so the parent who has the highest standard of living, they are often by the court, they're going to be obligated to make sure that when the child is in the other home, that their standard of living is not substantially different. And so if you have a very wealthy parent and then a very impoverished parent, the very wealthy parent is going to be called to equalize the standards in both homes, and so that the child is not going from extreme wealth one day to extreme poverty the next day. And so they are entitled to live the way that their parents are entitled to live. And so just remember when you're thinking about this that child support is an entitlement to the children. They are entitled to it. It's not like a privilege. And again, sometimes some parents who are the payors, they are paying the child support, they may be very dismayed about the amount of the child support. But basically what is happening is that when the child is in the custodial home, they need a bedroom, they need furniture, they use up electricity. That parent has to find childcare for them. that parent is usually responsible for purchasing the clothing and doing the cooking and going to the PTA meetings and things like that. And so the child support in many ways, in a very crude way, is sometimes a payment for the other parent not to be bothered, because that's what happens sometimes in custodial situations where one parent is fairly absent and the other parent is the primary caregiver and the child is primarily in that parent's home. And so when you think about things like, having to find a babysitter, the non-custodial parent often doesn't have to be bothered with finding a babysitter. The non-custodial parent doesn't have to be bothered with taking off sick days when the child is sick. The non-custodial parent doesn't have to be bothered with cooking dinner every night. They don't have to arrange their schedule around the child. They don't have to use up all of their gas day to day taking care of the child and, shuttling the child here and there. And so that is a lot of what child support really is about under the surface. And again, we're going to look at parental responsibility. Now, child support and parental support in general, those things are required by law. And all parents are required by law to financially provide support for any and all children that they create. And this includes children who do not reside with the parent. And so sometimes parents have a difficult time understanding why they have to provide support into another home, particularly when there are other children living in the home that are not the children of that child support paying parent, or there might be another spouse, a new spouse for the other parent. And so the payor parent may feel put out by this child support order. But those parents who are not in custody of the children and who have been ordered to pay child support, they are responsible for the support of any and all children that they create. And the issue is that if a parent does not provide a home for the child, the parent is generally expected to provide sort of a financial reimbursement to the parent or guardian who is providing that home for the children. Child support actions, when you're talking about marital situations, begin with divorce proceedings. And so when there is a divorce action, child support, child custody, those things are rolled over into the actual divorce decree. Now, when there is a non-marital parental situation and a parent seeks public assistance, the state basically expects parents to seek a child support order as a condition of receiving public assistance. This isn't to say that the parents are going to get the child support, but the states are expecting the parents to seek a child support order prior to receiving public assistance, because the preference is for parents to support their children versus the state supporting the children. And so basically the way the states look at public assistance is that it should be a last alternative in terms of parental support for the child. And so they want the parents to provide that support first and foremost. And then if the parents can't provide that support, then the support from the state is considered supplemental. Oftentimes, parents can't come to an agreement about child support on their own. But what parents need to remember is that if a parent does not support his or her child, the responsibility for care shifts to the government or the taxpayers. And what happens with this is this then triggers government oversight of the parents. And so when you have a non-marital situation and a parent is not providing that support, it's usually going to trigger then the custodial parent to go and seek additional assistance to care for the child. And so they're going to be looking for supplemental assistance. And when they look for that supplemental assistance, because the other parent is not providing that support, they're not taking care of their half of it, this is going to trigger government oversight of the parents. And sometimes the payor parent will feel victimized by this, but this really comes from generally not taking on that responsibility automatically on that parent's own accord. And so then the government steps in and then oversees that support process, particularly if the government is going to be providing the support to supplement the parental support or in lieu of the parental support. There's something called a government offset. Basically, the government inquires about child support for anyone who is seeking public assistance related to children. And so when a person applies for assistance, the government will seek to collect actual child support from the other parent to offset the government expenses on behalf of the little person. And so if there are multiple children, they're going to be seeking to collect child support for all of those children. And the government will also pursue reimbursement directly from the other parent. And that's one of the reasons why parents will often be paying child support directly to the state. And so the state is seeking its reimbursement for taking on basically that role for the parent. And so they may not be getting the full amount from the other parent, but it will serve to offset some of the expenses that the taxpayers are incurring in order to take on that responsibility for the other parent. One thing to remember is that in child support cases and applying for assistance is that a child support case is going to generally be opened automatically by the local child support enforcement agency. And there will be attempts by the government to locate the other parent. And they are expecting, so if it's a person who's seeking the public assistance, they're going to expect that the custodial parent is going to assist them with attempting to locate the other parent. And refusing to assist the state with locating the other parent might put a glitch in terms of the plans for getting the public assistance. So again, there is that expectation that the custodial parent is going to assist the state with locating the other parent. Information that the child support enforcement agency will be looking for in terms of the other parent. They will look for the full name of the other parent. They also want the last known address. They will ask for information about the last known place of employment, the social security number if the person has it, date of birth, and there's also the expectation that the custodial parent will be willing to testify in court regarding the child support issue. The first step in obtaining a support order in a non-marital situation is establishing the parental identity. And so in the case of paternity, there will be a need to determine paternity. If there is a case of maternity, there may be, not usually, but there may be a need to determine maternity. And so that will be the initial step in terms of obtaining a support order. And as a reminder, some people believe that child support is voluntary. And so if the person doesn't voluntarily want to pay child support, then they don't have to pay child support. Child support is generally ordered. It's generally court ordered. And so therefore it takes that volition out of it. It takes that voluntariness out of it once the child support has been ordered. And currently, there are three primary ways of determining maternity/paternity. One is parental admission. So the parent actually admits and owns their parental relationship with the child. Another is court order, and then another is genetic testing. And so for some parents who have been involved in multiple public assistance requests and multiple child support orders in terms of non-marital situations, their DNA may already be on file. And so someone else making a claim of paternity in particular, that claim can be made against the DNA that's already available in that DNA bank. Remember, if a parent is not receiving any financial support for the children, from the other parent. The custodial parent has both a right and a duty to pursue acquisition of the child support through the state court system, through the family court system. Now, when this occurs, the court will determine the type of support that's required for the child, and the court will legally order the support for the child. Now, some people have noticed that when there is a marital situation and there is a divorce, the child support orders may look a little different because of that relationship, but for the most part, the court determines the child support based upon the needs of each individual child in the family. And the court also can overrule, informal child support agreements that the parents have, agreed upon, that they've created for themselves. And they do this in the best interest of the child. And so they're trying to fashion a child support agreement that's going to be in the best interest of the child. And they're also doing that balancing in terms of the standard of living that we talked about. Now, in some unusual circumstances, there may be a situation where the couple, the parents, are married, but they're separated. And in that instance, what the Child Support Enforcement Agency is going to be looking for, or the entity that is possibly providing the public assistance, they're going to be looking for a court-filed separation agreement. And they're also going to be looking for that separation agreement to have a child support provision. And so that's something that people need to be mindful of when they are applying for public assistance and they are still married. And so the separation agreement, you can pretty much look forward to the separation agreement sort of morphing into the divorce decree. And so the stipulations will generally be very similar. And so that includes the child support. It may change, but it often does not. Sometimes there are instances of domestic violence, and the courts are aware of that, and so are the public assistance agencies. And so in those instances, some parents may not be willing to assist with locating an abusive parent. And so there can be exceptions made in those instances when you're talking about situations where a person, either the parent or the child, has been or they have been victims of domestic violence. And so that would be an exception. And individuals who are seeking public assistance, if they have those concerns about safety related to domestic violence, they need to let those agencies know that. During the governmental shutdown, one of the things that it's become very clear is that it is very important that parents make sure that they have the appropriate assistance for their children, that they have the appropriate child support for their children. And so that may be one of the beneficial things that came out of this governmental shutdown, particularly when we're talking about SNAP and Section 8 and things like that. And so now when parents may not be able to get that assistance from the public assistance agencies, many parents are going to have to more actively pursue child support from a parent who has not been providing that child support. And so they will need to be a little bit more active with that. And so that might involve, hiring an attorney, but it's not necessary that a person has to have an attorney to pursue child support. That an individual can go to their family court and get some assistance with trying to get that support. And so people should not be dissuaded simply because they cannot afford an attorney. Okay, so let's look at what public assistance involves. For the most part, you have a number of ways that people can get public assistance. And you have food stamps, also known as the nutrition program. There's also financial assistance for parents. There's housing assistance, there's medical assistance, and then support for daycare. And as many of you probably already know, daycare is very, very expensive for little children. And if you're talking about more than one child, you're talking about a significant amount to be paid for daycare. So that is a huge public assistance. Temporary assistance to families in need that assistance is essentially a cash assistance, and it's provided to families with dependent children. And in situations where we're talking about non-marital situations or divorce situations, that payment, that cash payment, is used to supplement child support payments. And so that's when you will see those child support payments being made directly to the state, and then the state uses that as an offset. And so the right to receive child support, so that the custodial parent's right to receive child support, it will often be temporarily assigned to the government, meaning given to the government during that time of public assistance. And so when the person is no longer on public assistance, it's likely that they will get that child support paid directly to them. But in many instances, as many people can imagine, the child support does not measure up to what someone might be receiving in terms of public assistance. One thing people need to remember about temporary assistance for needy families is that it really is designed to be a temporary assistance. And so the goal is to give people a foundation in order to become self-sufficient. And so it's supposed to be sort of like a safety net, a little bit of a cushion while families prepare to be self-sufficient. And so it's not supposed to be designed as sort of a way of life. And what happens is that states actually receive these block grants, and they are supposed to operate and create programs that help TANF to achieve the aims of the program, which is self-sufficiency. And so they do create programs to help parents sort of what you call get off of welfare, and that should be the goal, is creating self-sufficiency in the parents. Another type of assistance is known as SNAP, and that's the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, also known as food stamps, also known as the EBT card, and so it's that electronic benefit transfer. And so SNAP it's designed to offer nutrition assistance to millions of people, not just people with children, but also elderly people, people who have all sorts of impairments. And so it's for individuals who basically have a low income and they need this assistance in order to fight hunger. And so it's a nutrition assistance program, and it's designed for low-income families regardless of whether there are children present or not. Now, right now, many people have received their benefits in terms of SNAP for February also, and so they will not be getting another payment in this instance in February. And so that's pretty much the end of that program for now until March, if it is going to continue. We're going to do another video on some legislation and some other things that are going on regarding SNAP, that these things have not been discussed in standard media, and we're going to talk about those things because there are some things that are going on with SNAP that are not being discussed right now and that need to be explored and examined. And so they don't really relate though to this particular situation. They relate to what are called able-bodied individuals, and it's not really related to those with children. Now you can look at the Department of Agriculture's website and get all sorts of resources regarding SNAP. There are eligibility limits that you might want to look at, or that people might want to look at if they are interested in this. If you work for an organization that's serving people, or you're an individual who's just interested for yourself or someone else, you can see that on the table there is a listing in terms of the household size, and then the gross monthly income and the net monthly income that the parents can have. And so that's something to definitely look at in terms of preparing for an application. Resources can also include housing, and this usually comes in the form of housing vouchers, the housing choice vouchers. And the housing choice voucher program is a federal government program. Again, these are federal programs, and they are providing assistance to people in different states. And so the states actually facilitate the program, but the funding generally comes from the federal government. And so the Housing Choice Voucher Program is run by the federal government, and it's a major program. It's a huge program for assisting individuals who have very, very low income. And it's also for for the elderly, for disabled individuals, and it's to make sure that the bulk of society, that people have decent, safe, and sanitary housing. And this is in the private market. So this isn't public housing. So we're talking about private housing, but public assistance to get into that private housing. And just like the Department of Agriculture runs the food program, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, they administer the voucher program. And as with the nutrition program, the eligibility for housing is also determined based upon gross income and also the family size. Now, this particular program is limited to United States citizens and very specific categories of non-citizens who have a specific immigration status eligibility. Generally, though, the family's income cannot exceed 50% of the median income for the specific county that the family is living in, or that metropolitan area, that region. And one thing that's helpful, though, is that the median income levels are published by the government, so you can look those up. Finally, we have Medicaid, and Medicaid is authorized under the Social Security Act, and it functions pretty much alongside Medicare. And so Medicaid is designed to provide health care assistance for low-income individuals. And so children are also included in this governmental health care coverage and provision, and that program is known as CHIP. It's the Children's Health Insurance Program. And so there is also the availability of health care coverage. And so you can see where there's sort of an umbrella of public assistance available to families who are struggling and trying to get to self-sufficiency. Many custodial parents may be feeling a little bit apprehensive about the future in terms of public assistance that they might be receiving. And so now might be a good time for many people to start to look at pursuing child support if they have not pursued that or they have not received that. And so that would facilitate getting support for children in the event that there is a lag in support from the government or a total destruction of that support from the government. And so it's kind of hard to know where things are going to go from here. As of now, particularly when we're talking about SNAP right now, everyone pretty much has received their benefits for February, and there won't be any more benefits in February for SNAP. And so again, now might be the best time for people to contact their governments and contact the courts to see what it is that they might need to do in order to get a child support order. Some parents also may want to do informal things if that's what works for them. No one is forced to actually go to court to file for child support, but if court support is needed to get child support, then people might want to consider that. And again, you don't necessarily need an attorney for that, and the courts will provide some assistance with getting those sorts of actions underway. Now, what we've covered child support and child public assistance and how those two are related. We've looked at the obligations for child support. We've looked at the role of a parent in terms of providing that child support. We've looked at establishing paternity and maternity and how child support and public assistance actions may vary based upon a person being divorced or non-marital. We've also looked at that issue of maintaining standard of living in understanding the purposes and uses of child support. We've looked at the types of assistance available for parents and how that assistance is determined. Remember, knowledge is power. Take care and see you soon.